Yes.
Um, so how does hip hop inform your faith life in the day to day?
For me, multiple levels. I mean, the reality is that if you're a hip hop conscious, you don't listen to just hip hop. That's not hip hop, right? And that's kind of the biggest stigma that people have. You know, if you really, 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 really want to know what hip hop is about, talk to him. Listen to KRS-One speak. Listen to our Immortal Technique, a Tony Blackman speak, a Martha Diaz. There's a demeanor to them, right? A sense of compassion and understanding. I say hip hop not so much in a religious perspective because I'm very, 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 very critical of religion, and we talk about this all the time with Richard. And they to the point where people call me guerrilla Catholic, and you can for so many reasons, but a guerrilla Catholic. Guerrilla meaning that I love my Catholicism, but I use tactics to distill that information, but I don't proselytize. That's never been kind of my style, and I found it interesting that the Pope recently released the 10 Steps to Happiness, and what was number 9? Proselytizing is an issue, and I'm like, yeah, and I love hip hop because of that. Every person that I've met, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Shiite, or whatever, that loves their faith but loves hip hop, we can go at it all day theologically, but at the end of the day, hip hop has the last say. Now, am I saying that over dominates what God has to say? Absolutely not. But it informs me in that the more I go to, for example, these concerts that are not mainstream, the more I attend events that hip hop does on a grassroots level, and I hear the stories from people, I feel a connection there, and it's because of that I've been able to build friendships and coalitions where I might not have in a traditional religious setting. I wrestle with this with Richard all the time. You know, I have no problem saying this, but I wrestle a lot with institutionalized religion. I've worked in ministry pretty much all my life. You know, I've done all my sacraments. Well, except marriage, that's distant. And you know, I've really, really gone in from a studious perspective, ministerial perspective, and I've seen the highs and lows of it. And I think I don't really find a lot of that when I was in hip hop, when I was in the studio, when I was at the streets, when I was at different academic settings and all over the world. I felt a sense of joy in that, and that's kind of has helped me to gain a much more deeper connection and understanding about the world and who I am. The more I got enwrapped in hip hop and how it was moving and wielding other people in this world. You know, I'm the type of person that, you know, as in hip hop they say you got to show and prove. You got to show and prove. The only way I know you got God in your life is how you treat me when I meet you. You know what I'm saying? And I've met a lot of people involved in this culture who love me, embrace me, and hug me without even knowing me. And that was a lot of the ideology that was instilled from the Universal Zulu Nation, who I've met many times throughout my life, but also people involved in this culture from a variety of settings, whether they are psychologists, clinical workers, clergy people. And I think it's one of the few times in my life I've been kind of able to like put my guard down and be okay with being Catholic, but at the same time not feeling like I'm going to be judged because I'm not following the narrative path, the narrow path that sometimes I feel fundamentalists will throw at me, right? But I think hip hop, I look at it more like what brings joy into my life is seeing people happy. That's kind of always been my spirituality. You know, like I like to sit back and seeing people enjoy themselves. That brings joy and that brings a connection for me and my life. And going to Lagos, Nigeria, like I did last year, or when I did a conference in Toronto and seeing the kind of things that it's doing in people's lives. When I think about this hip hop group, for example, I'm forgetting their name, they consist of Palestinians and Jews in a hip hop group. And what more better way than to have that in a time of conflict? You know what I'm saying? Because they're putting their differences aside. And I see hip hop really doing that, and it's really changed a lot of my life and outset on life. I can definitely say that I've maintained pretty much all of my friendships and love for God and humanity from people that I met doing hip hop.
This is more of a, I guess, comment. Probably being actually the only one here who can remember before hip hop. I think that as juveniles back their ass up in this place, there's a comparison that I see, I think, in the hip hop, in hip hop we have today, as we understand it and experience it in popular culture, right? And how we understand Christianity, in particular how we see the Roman Catholicism. In that, the hip hop that I grew up with, right? And I remember the emergence of Melly Mel. I remember, running home to watch Video Music Box. I remember, watching Wild Style and Beat Street and Crush Crew and loving it because these were all the people that I knew and was listening to, and what they were talking about was a reflection of their communities, their aspirations, their struggles. And as much as hip hop was about not only revealing that and expressing that, but it was also about a celebration of life, right? It's celebrating the life that we have, good or bad, and it brought people together around that. That the violence doesn't need to be, we don't have to accept this way of life, right? And I think about I think it was maybe in 87 or 88 when self-destruction was dropped, and you had groups, all of these different hip-hop artists who came together to talk about what's going on, right? It was a social commentary that in today's world wouldn't be acceptable, I think, in what we would consider mainstream hip-hop, right? Mainstream hip-hop, you can't talk about nonviolence. You can't talk about, upholding women. You can't talk about, getting drugs off the street. No, it's got to be, I'm pushing weight. I'm doing this. I got my whole thing, and all this other stuff that is popularized, right? And it's become what sells. And the comparison I make is, in many ways, the Roman Catholic Church has had a core message, right? That in today's world is not acceptable. It's anti, pop culture, where what we want to talk about and what we push is seen as being old-fashioned, as being out of touch with society, and all these other negative things. But I think in the same way, in a lot of what the hip-hop artists of the late 70s and the 80s and even the 90s, what they were talking about, now they're the underground artists, they're the alternative, right? They're the commons of the hip-hop world, and Talib and Mos Def and other people who are talking about something that is still very, very relevant in our community. And what I've always appreciated about hip-hop is that hip-hop, I think, has always maintained a root connection to the community. Right? Hip hop cannot survive if it's severed from our community. The same way I think the church severed from a community doesn't exist. It loses meaning. Right? It has no context. Right? But it's very sad for me, for someone who grew up listening to hip hop, back when we used to come up with the dances, and all that other stuff, and my mother would be like, "Mira muchacho, you're gonna, trying to scratch, with records at home, like, and all that other stuff, right? I mean,